The faces in the boardroom turned toward me with that mixture of pity and awkward discomfort that signals the end of a career. I stood frozen mid-sentence, my presentation glowing on the massive display behind me. 4 years of my work, my code, my neural architecture, the breakthrough that was supposed to secure our company's place at the top of the AI industry. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Nova," said a voice that didn't sound sorry at all. Cassidy walked in wearing a tailored ivory blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her heels clicking against the polished floor with the confidence of someone who had never once been told no. Marcus Hale's daughter. Perfect timing, as always. I watched her glide to the front of the room while my body went numb, fingers still hovering over my clicker. The 7 venture capitalists, who minutes earlier had been leaning forward in their chairs with wide eyes, now straightened, recalibrated, their attention completely redirected like satellites catching a new signal. "My father asked me to share some exciting news," Cassidy continued, not even glancing my way. "We've developed an alternative approach that shows significantly stronger market potential." My throat closed. She pulled up her own deck, effortlessly minimizing mine with a casual swipe, the same gesture she was making to my entire existence. "We don't need your direction anymore," she said, her voice dropped low enough that only I could hear as she passed me. Then louder to the room. "Nova's work laid important groundwork, but we're moving towards something more innovative, something scalable." I stood there, invisible now, as she presented slides that looked unmistakably like concepts I had built in my home office at 2 a.m., architectures I'd sketched in my private notebooks, training methods I had never formally presented but had written about obsessively, methods that somehow now belonged to her. When she finished, the room erupted. Derek Sloan, the lead VC from Pinnacle Ventures, actually stood up. "This is exactly what we want to back," he said, beaming at Cassidy. "Far more commercially viable than anything we've seen this cycle." I packed my laptop with mechanical movements while they discussed term sheets and Series B valuations and global expansion timelines. Nobody noticed when I unclipped my access badge and set it quietly on the table. I caught Marcus's eye as I walked toward the exit. The CEO who had once told me I was the most important hire he'd ever made now looked through me like I was already gone. "Enjoy the funding," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It was only when I reached the parking garage that the shaking started. I sat in my car on level 3 of the Embarcadero Center, gripping my steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. 4 years of architecture, of training runs, of model refinements, gone, presented as someone else's vision. And the worst part? They didn't even need me to explain it. Cassidy had studied my work closely enough to sell it with a smile. I drove home through San Francisco traffic, already knowing what I had to do. I had maybe 48 hours before Marcus realized what I'd set in motion. Before we continue, if this story is hitting different, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The revenge coming is something else entirely. Drop a comment. What do you think Nova should do next? My name is Nova Reyes. I'm not what most people picture when they imagine a Silicon Valley AI engineer. I don't have a Stanford PhD or parents who went to MIT. I don't have a trust fund or a network built at exclusive boarding schools. What I have is a mind that sees patterns in data the way other people see faces and clouds, instantly, intuitively, almost involuntarily, and the kind of stubbornness that comes from growing up with nothing to fall back on. I grew up in Fresno, California. My mother cleaned offices downtown. We moved 4 times before I turned 16. I taught myself to code on a secondhand laptop from a church sale, sitting at the kitchen table after my mom went to bed, running Python tutorials until my eyes blurred. I got a full scholarship to UC Berkeley. I was the first person in my family to graduate from a 4-year university. When most of my classmates were doing summer internships at Google through their alumni networks, I was freelancing on nights and weekends to cover what my scholarship didn't. Marcus Hale hired me 4 years ago when Halcyon AI was still operating out of a converted warehouse in Soma. He'd seen a blog post I wrote about adaptive learning rate optimization, a concept I had developed independently while working on a personal side project. "You think differently," he told me during our interview. "That's rarer than any degree." For 4 years, I worked 18-hour days building what I called ARIA, Adaptive Reasoning and Inference Architecture. It wasn't a product, it was a philosophy made of code, a way to make AI systems that could reason under ambiguity rather than just pattern match at scale. The kind of general intelligence layer that every major tech company was desperately chasing but hadn't cracked. It was my life's work, the thing that was finally going to prove I belonged here. I never saw Cassidy coming. She arrived 7 months ago, fresh out of a tech MBA program in London, installed in the corner office with a title that didn't mean anything: Chief Innovation Strategist. He introduced her with that proud father glow, telling the team how lucky we were to have her entrepreneurial vision. I tried to be generous. I answered her questions about ARIA when she asked. I explained my methodology when she seemed genuinely curious. I thought she wanted to learn. "You're extraordinary, Nova," she told me once, sitting on the edge of my desk, watching me annotate training logs. "But you don't understand how this business really works." I didn't know those words were both a warning and a blueprint. The investor meeting had been scheduled for 6 weeks, my chance to present ARIA directly to the people who controlled Halcyon's future. Marcus had personally reviewed my deck. He'd nodded at the benchmarks. He'd said, "This is going to change everything." Then, 5 days before the meeting, Cassidy started asking more specific questions. She needed to understand the architecture for alignment purposes. She wanted to review my private development logs to prepare talking points. She asked to walk through the model's unique differentiators one more time. I opened every door she knocked on. Now I stood in my apartment in the Mission District, staring at the city lights through my floor-to-ceiling window. My dog, Atlas, pressed his warm weight against my legs, sensing what I couldn't say out loud. She hadn't just stolen my presentation, she had stolen my future. My phone buzzed, a text from Priya, my closest friend at Halcyon. "What happened? The whole office is spiraling. Nobody knows anything." Before I could answer, another buzz, this one from Marcus. "We need to talk, tonight." I turned off my phone. I opened my laptop instead. There was work to do. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp San Francisco clarity that makes the city feel like it's apologizing for something. I showered, dressed deliberately, my best blazer, the charcoal one I wore to conferences, and prepared for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. When I arrived at Halcyon's offices on Mission Street, the security desk waved me through with a puzzled look. "Thought you were gone," the guard said. "Not officially," I replied, smiling like broken glass. The open floor plan buzzed with strange energy. Conversations cut short as I passed. Eyes dropped. I walked directly to my workstation and began collecting my things. Priya appeared at my elbow, urgent and low. "Marcus has been trying to reach you since yesterday evening. He's furious. What did you do?" I placed my coffee mug carefully into my bag. "Nothing he didn't invite." "Nova, this isn't like you. Talk to me." "Nova," Marcus's voice cracked across the floor like a whip. "My office, now." The walk felt like crossing a minefield. He was standing in his doorway, jaw tight, tie slightly crooked, the rare look of a man whose control was slipping. I closed the door behind me. I didn't sit. "Where is it?" he said. I tilted my head. "Where is it exactly?" "Don't. The investors arrive in 90 minutes to begin technical due diligence, and suddenly our engineering team cannot reproduce the core reasoning layer, the one ARIA runs on, the one you built. I let his words sit in the air between us. "I'm afraid I don't understand," I said, finally. "According to yesterday's meeting, you're moving forward with Cassidy's vision. My architecture isn't needed anymore." Those were her exact words. His face darkened. "Her concept runs on top of your architecture, which is suddenly producing errors nobody can explain. What did you remove?" I smiled then, the kind of smile that only arrives when you've been carrying a plan for months and the moment has finally come to set it down. "I didn't remove anything from Halcyon systems, Marcus. That would be unethical, possibly illegal. Then explain to me why our best engineers can't get it to run." The door swung open. Cassidy swept in, pulling up short when she saw me. "What is she doing here?" "I came for my things," I said pleasantly, since I was told my contributions were no longer required. Cassidy looked from me to her father. "She did something. The model isn't running. 3 of our senior engineers have been up all night." "That's unfortunate," I said, adjusting my bag. "Have you tried following your own innovative approach, the one you presented so confidently yesterday?" The color left her face in a slow wave. "I was building on your work," she said, her voice shifting. "That wasn't mentioned yesterday. In fact, I believe the framing was that you'd developed an alternative direction, something more commercially viable." Marcus stepped forward. His voice dropped, almost conciliatory. "Fix this and we'll renegotiate everything. Title, equity, salary, whatever you want." I looked at him steadily. "I can't fix something I didn't break, Marcus." "Then why isn't it working?" Cassidy pressed, something desperate bleeding through now. I checked my watch. "Because engineering requires understanding, not just slides and talking points. Now, if you'll excuse me." Marcus moved to block the door. "You're not leaving until this is resolved." I looked up at him, calm, measured. "Are you physically detaining me? Because that would open a very different kind of conversation." The threat hung between them like smoke. Marcus wasn't stupid. He stepped aside. "This isn't over," he said. "Actually," I replied, walking past him, "I quit yesterday. You were there when your daughter announced it." Outside, I took the first real breath I'd had in 24 hours. The morning air off the bay was clean and cold, and it felt like beginning something. 10 minutes later, sitting in my car with a view of the building's glass facade, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go. 30 seconds later, same number. I answered. "Nova Reyes speaking." "This is Derek Sloan." His voice was clipped, controlled, and for the first time, uncertain. "We need to speak, not over the phone." "I'm listening." "The cafe on Beale Street, 15 minutes. He hung up without waiting. I smiled at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. Right on schedule. Derek was already in a corner booth when I arrived, as far from the door as possible. His normally pressed appearance showed the first cracks, tie slightly off-center, a faint sheen at his temples. I ordered a cortado before sitting down, taking my time. "What is happening over there?" he said, leaning in the moment I sat. "You'll need to be more specific." "Don't. Yesterday, Cassidy Hale presents a breakthrough AI architecture. Today, 3 senior engineers can't make it run, and Marcus Hale looks like he's about to have a cardiac event." "That sounds incredibly stressful for them." Derek's eyes narrowed. 7 investors are prepared to move on a $120 million Series B, not if this is theater. I sipped my cortado. "Interesting problem. What do you want?" He was negotiating now. I could see it, the shift in posture, the directness. "I want to understand something first. In yesterday's presentation, who did Cassidy say built the architecture?" He paused, thought back.
She presented it as Halcyon's innovation, her team's work. Her team's. I nodded slowly. Interesting. His face shifted as the math resolved itself behind his eyes. You're saying... I'm saying you should be very careful about where you commit $120 million. I stood, leaving my cortado half-finished. Especially when the person presenting can't actually produce what they're selling. Wait, he reached toward me without touching. We need to continue this. I agree. I placed a card on the table, nothing on it but a number. Call that at 4 p.m. if you want to see something that actually works. I left him staring at the card. By the time I was back in my apartment, my phone was lit up with Priya's messages. Total implosion. They can't get ARIA to run at all. Marcus fired 2 engineers for suggesting the model might be fundamentally flawed. Cassidy just screamed at the CTO in the middle of the floor. Nova, what did you do? I didn't answer. I opened my laptop and started preparing for 4 p.m. At 2:15, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera.
Marcus, alone, no driver visible. He'd come himself. I let him in. He looked older than he had that morning. The CEO persona had cracked, and underneath was just a tired man in an expensive suit. The investors are threatening to walk, he said, no preamble. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. It wasn't anger, just exhaustion. You planned this. I protected myself, I said, after being publicly erased and having my life's work attributed to someone who didn't write a single line of it. He winced. Cassidy was overzealous. She should have credited you. Credited me? I almost laughed. That's one way to describe it. Come back, full credit, your name on everything, name your terms. Why would I trust anything you offer me now? Because without you, we lose the company. No, Marcus, you lose the company. I've already built something else. His face changed. You can't take Halcyon's IP to competitors. I didn't take anything that belongs to Halcyon. Then why can't we run it? I opened the front door. Because science is complex, I said, and you can't steal what you never truly understood. He left with his phone already at his ear. I leaned against the closed door and let my hand shake for exactly 30 seconds. Then I went back to work. At 4 p.m., Derek called. I'm not alone, he said immediately. All 7 investors are with me. Text me the address. 2 hours later, I stood in a private conference suite on the 41st floor of a building in the financial district, the entire investment group arrayed before me. No Marcus, no Cassidy, just me and the work I had bled 4 years to create. Before I begin, I said, connecting my laptop, I need to be transparent. What you're about to see belongs to me, not to Halcyon AI. Derek leaned forward. That contradicts what we were told yesterday. I imagine many things you were told yesterday won't hold up to scrutiny. I walked them through ARIA's true architecture, the actual reasoning layer, the training methodology that made the system work. I ran live demonstrations, let them interact with the model directly, let them probe it, stress test it, ask it the questions they'd been saving. When I finished, the room was silent for 10 full seconds. This is genuinely remarkable, said a woman named Jordan Park, one of the partners from Meridian Capital. But it raises a serious question about what Halcyon has been representing to this group. I can answer that question, but first I need to know whether you're interested in funding the actual innovation, not a presentation about it. Derek leaned forward. You're telling us you've already formed your own company? 11 weeks ago, Refract AI, 4 people, including myself, all former Halcyon engineers, who left in the past year for reasons that will surprise no one given what you've seen today. You were planning this before the presentation, Jordan said. I was protecting myself before the presentation, I corrected. Once I understood what was happening, I started building an exit that didn't leave my work behind. Halcyon will claim the IP. I slid a folder across the table.
This documents every component of ARIA that I developed independently, outside company hours, on personal hardware, with personal compute credits, verified by 3 independent IP attorneys, and timestamped across 6 months of version control history on private repositories. Derek opened the folder. His eyebrows climbed slowly. "You've been building this case for months." "I've been paying attention," I said. Another investor, a quiet man named Garrett, who hadn't spoken once, leaned forward. "In plain terms, what does ARIA actually do that nothing else does?" I appreciated the question. It was the right one. Every major AI lab is building systems that are extraordinarily good at finding patterns in data they've already seen. The problem is, the real world doesn't work that way. Reality is full of situations those systems have never encountered. ARIA reasons through ambiguity. It can work with incomplete information, contradictory signals, and novel contexts, and still reach defensible conclusions. The first applications are clinical decision support, helping physicians reason through complex cases where there's no clear precedent. But the platform extends to any domain where uncertainty is the norm: financial risk assessment, legal reasoning, crisis response, anywhere human judgment under pressure is currently the bottleneck. The energy in the room transformed. This wasn't about corporate politics anymore. This was about something real. "We'll need independent technical verification," Derek said. His voice carried a different register now, not skepticism, but serious interest. "I welcome it entirely. In the meantime," Jordan added, "I'm recommending we suspend our process with Halcyon." The investors asked me to step out briefly. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the bay, watching the lights begin to emerge as evening settled over San Francisco. 5 minutes later, Jordan came to the door. "Come back in, please." I did. "We'd like to move forward," Derek said. "Subject to technical verification, Meridian and our co-investors are prepared to offer $75 million initial funding with structured additions tied to development milestones, potential ceiling of $140 million. I kept my expression neutral, even as something enormous moved through me. "I'd like my attorneys to review the terms," I said. "Of course," Derek almost smiled. "One more thing. Marcus Hale called me 11 times today. He's claiming you sabotaged Halcyon's systems. That's a serious accusation, one he won't be able to support." "I didn't think so." He stood, extending his hand. "We'll be in touch, Nova." That evening, I met Priya at a restaurant in Noe Valley, far from anywhere we might be recognized. She arrived looking wrung out, her eyes wide with a day's worth of impossible events. I have never, not even waiting to sit, seen anything like today in my life. Marcus threw a monitor off his desk. The CTO quit at 3 p.m. Half the engineering team is already on LinkedIn. Is everyone okay? Physically, professionally, the investors walked out, all of them. I nodded. "You planned this," she said. "Not an accusation, just recognition." I protected myself. The plan grew out of that. "The model doesn't run without you, does it?" "It runs," I said, carefully, "just not the way they think it does. The version in Halcyon systems is complete, but the critical optimization layer, the part that makes it actually work at scale, that lives somewhere else." She stared at me. "How long have you been building the exit?" 11 weeks. Since the 3rd time I caught Cassidy at my workstation after hours. Priya went quiet for a moment. Then, "Is there room at Refract for one more engineer?" I smiled. "I was going to ask you that tonight." 2 days later, my attorney called. Halcyon had filed for an emergency injunction. The judge denied it within hours, citing the IP documentation I had submitted weeks in advance. He's panicking. Filing without strategy, that's not going to serve him. Industry blogs were already running the story by afternoon. Halcyon's valuation had dropped sharply. Board members were calling emergency sessions, and through a contact who preferred to remain unnamed,
I learned that Cassidy had been quietly removed from her position by end of business. I didn't feel what I expected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a strange, clean emptiness, the kind that comes when something that consumed you finally releases its grip. That evening, working late in Refract's new space, a bright, modest office and dog patch that smelled like fresh paint and possibility, my security app pinged with a visitor alert. The camera showed Cassidy standing at the street door. No ivory blazer, no heels, hair pulled back carelessly, hands in her jacket pockets, posture deflated into something unrecognizable from the woman who had glided into that boardroom 48 hours earlier. Against every reasonable instinct, I buzzed her in. She entered slowly, looking around the space with something that wasn't contempt, it was surprise. This is it? This is enough. She sat without being invited, like all the performance had gone out of her. My father hasn't spoken to me since yesterday. The board removed me this morning. The investors are gone. She looked up. Everything's gone. What did you expect would happen, I said, not unkindly, when you presented something you didn't build and couldn't explain? She wasn't stealing it, she said, automatically, then stopped herself. I thought I understood it well enough. I thought understanding the outcome was the same as understanding the work. That's the oldest mistake in tech, mistaking the demo for the engineering. She was quiet for a moment. How did you know? How did you know this would all collapse exactly this way? I watched the patterns. While you were studying my documentation, I was studying you. Your questions were always about the outputs, never the architecture. You wanted the what, never the why. That told me everything. She stood. Something had resolved in her face. Not peace, exactly, just clarity. You planned the whole thing. I created options. You and your father closed off all of yours. She paused at the door. The investors, they're with you now? The terms are being finalized. She nodded once, and then she was gone. I sat alone in the quiet lab after she left, surrounded by equipment I had bought with my own savings, servers I had assembled myself on weekends, whiteboards covered with diagrams that no one had assigned me, that I'd drawn because I needed to draw them, because the ideas wouldn't leave me alone. This space was small compared to Halcyon's gleaming Mission Street offices, but every inch of it was mine. 3 days later, a courier arrived at Refract with a small package. Inside, a worn Moleskine notebook, my original development journal, the one that had vanished from my desk 8 months ago. A note in Marcus's handwriting was tucked inside the front cover. You've won. Was it worth destroying what we built? I held the notebook for a long moment, feeling the weight of 4 years in my hands. Was it worth it? I thought about the answer as I walked into our workspace that afternoon. Priya and 2 other engineers already deep in work, code filling their screens, the low hum of servers in the background like a heartbeat. They looked up when I came in, and in their faces, not the careful deference I'd learned to expect at Halcyon, not the sideways glances of people wondering if I really belonged. Just respect. Clean and simple, and completely real. Ready to build something that matters? I asked. Their smiles answered everything Marcus's note never could. Yes. It was worth every single second. If this story resonated, hit like and subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be erased. Have you ever had your work taken credit for by someone who didn't earn it? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And remember, the real win was never watching them fall. It was proving they never were necessary to begin with.